Well, good afternoon. What's happening? At least 14 of you are actually on time. I don't know. TikTok. Got 30 people who are not necessarily on time. Got to call them out when they come on in. Every time I let somebody in, we have to stop and point. That trick works a whole lot better when we're actually in the classroom. When like after 2 or 3 minutes, anybody who walks in, the whole room goes silent or stands up and points. That's a lot of fun. All righty. So welcome back. Week number 2. Glad to see you all. And so you had some homework. I want to make sure that we discuss that a bit and set a course for how we're going to move forward with that homework. Also discuss any ahas that you had from source of business conversation that we had on Thursday, right? So Thursday, we officially started our source of business conversation. We took a vote. We went ahead and ticked off a couple. I think we went through your 36 touch in your database. We went through the orphans and we went through for sale by owner on our way to expired. So that's where we're started today. So let's go back first and let me ask about your call homework. So part of your homework was to find 5 people in your database. Didn't matter to me who they were. Could be really easy 5 people. And reach out and have a conversation with them, like a care call conversation with them. How'd that go? That was 1 a day, by the way. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Or 5 on Friday if you just wanted to get out of the way. Or 5 about an hour and a half ago if you forgot and decided you wanted to get it in before we started class at 4.
So, Rick, I did it.
Yes, sir.
I got them all out of the way on Friday, just because I just wanted to try the whole exercise. And for the most part, most of the people, of course, are happy at home and where they're situated. But interestingly enough, and I think that this is one area what I would like to cover at some point in this call, is a former colleague of mine who lives in Norwalk, has 2 young kids, and he is looking to move to another town where it has a slightly better school system. And the issue he ran into, he looked at Trumbull, and the issue he ran into is that the quality of the house that he saw, he felt was way too expensive for what he was getting. And the concern that he also had was, if I sell my place in Norwalk, where else do I move when the market is so expensive? And he said, you're going to find that a lot in your real estate business, especially since there's no inventory. And to try and convince someone to sell their house, well, where are they going to move to once they sell their house? And I thought that was a very good point.
Yeah, so well, it's certainly one of the things that we are dealing with right now, right? One of the main issues that sellers face is lack of inventory. It's a positive for them when they're on the selling side, right? So they put their house on the market, they have people fighting over them, multiple offers, perhaps 5 or 10% more than the house really should be worth, just because of the lack of inventory, right? And yet, because life just works this way, right? You also have to remember that there's the other side of it. You have to live someplace. And so the point being made of where do we go? Well, the answer is perhaps multifold. The first answer I would give is, here's the good news. Because you are a seller first and a buyer second, you're in control of that. You get to put your house on the market and set the rules, which means you can put your house on the market, which means you get to put your house on the market and then make the rule of, I reserve the right to find suitable housing before I will close. Is that something a seller can do?
Yeah.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. So the idea of the seller setting the rules when the inventory is so tight is a benefit to them on the buy side. Now, you threw out a couple of different things. The other thing that I heard you say was this particular person was selling in Norwalk and buying in Trumbull because he felt the schools were better in Trumbull, and yet thought that the price of the house that he was looking at in Trumbull was inflated. One of the things people have to understand is that one of the pieces that drives value in a specific town is what?
Education.
Schools, exactly right. So if you're looking to improve the schools, you may have to decide to pay a little bit more for the area you're moving to, because schools is a big part of that valuation process, right? So it's, I would love to be able to find a town or a city that had awesome schools and really low real estate values. Right? I mean, so it's the idea of, hey, you know what? Everybody wants that, right? But you can't have your cake and eat it too. Instead, if you're looking to improve the school system that your kids are going to go to, you may have to be willing to pay a little bit more for the same kind of house, or accept the fact that you're going to have to trade one for the other, right? If there's no ability to spend up, you may have to make a lateral financial move, and that means that the house might not be as spectacular as what you're leaving. It's just kind of the way it works. It's a balancing act, right?
It is a balancing act, and I agree with that. However, there comes a time where, it's all about economics, right? Supply versus demand. And right now, the sellers hold all the cards. And in his sense, and I agree with it, I see my neighbor's house that's on the market for, $250,000 over what the market, would dictate in any other market. And she's actually getting viewers. So, and that's what his point was, is that, maybe now is not the optimal time to buy because, it's just too inflated. And I think some sellers understand this, that the market works in their favor, and they're going to try and, get as much money as they possibly can out of the situation that we're in today.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Yeah, let's be clear. It is not the best time for any seller to put their house on the market. However, there are enough, right? So that's why casting a really wide net is so important, because everybody's circumstances are different. So what you're looking for today are people who are interested in putting their house on the market because they either desire to or they have to. Right? A lot of the listings that come on the market, it's not necessarily a voluntary move. Somebody died, somebody's getting divorced, somebody's getting married, somebody had another child and now they're bursting at the seams, right? There's lots of opportunity with people who do have motivation, right? And so I think the whole point of this conversation is to drive us to what we're starting tomorrow, probably mid-class tomorrow, midway through class tomorrow, and that is our whole unit on sellers, right? Motivation drives the listing side of the business. Frankly, motivation drives the buyer side of the business too, but we're going to focus on it first on the listing side of the business. Unmotivated sellers are sellers that I'm happy to refer to somebody else, right? Or have them sit and do what it is that they need to do. And when they are motivated, they can come back to the table and then make their move. But unmotivated sellers are the bane of a real estate agent's existence. Because then you're saying things like, well, but look at the comps and look at this, and the market's doing this, and the market's doing that, and the earlier the offer, the better, and time is not your friend, and you're saying all the right things, but for someone who has absolutely no motivation to actually create a sale, That all just falls on deaf ears. And it's fascinating because I've watched this happen. When agents find themselves constantly attempting to convince unmotivated sellers to go on the market, eventually it pushes the agents away from the list side of the business, because what they've decided is that all sellers are unreasonable, and therefore there's no way I'm ever going to attempt to take a listing ever again. I'd rather just work with buyers. They're simpler.
I remember the year when I fired an unwilling seller, and because he just wasn't allowing showings, he's just being really rude. And I put up with a couple of months and I fired him, and it felt great. And I immediately got better, more and better listings right after that. It was like he was like a rock in my path of moving forward with my business.
Yeah, so true, Andy. Right? It's the idea of, if you hold on so tightly to the things that you have, even if they're sucky, well, then you're not able to actually open your hands to receive some additional stuff that could be better. I said that really poorly, but you get the point, right? What else?
Myself, I've been dealing with a troublesome listing, and recently it has expired, and one realtor friend of mine said, "Oh no, you shouldn't let it expire." And in my eyes, I've done everything I could to try and sell this, and I'm being met with challenges that are outside of my control. The seller's not in control of the property. And the way I left it with the seller was is that we're going to take care of she's going to attempt to take care of some of the problems that have, inflicted this listing, which mainly has been a tenant that's been the main source of most of the problems. She's working on eviction, and then we're going to go ahead and possibly relist it once she gets a few things under control. But even then, it's a very difficult listing to sell because of location. There's a deed restriction that's in place until 2026 that a new buyer inherits some of these deed restrictions that they're going to have to follow until that date. And as soon as I explain this to any potential realtors, because there are tenants in it, don't want them going, if they're, not an owner occupant, that's one of the stipulations. They have to be an owner occupant. People are just running. So at this point, I almost feel, where do I go from here with it? With that type of, I guess, roadblocks in the way.
Yeah. So Stacey makes some interesting points, right? First and foremost, there's one person who has control over whether or not a listing sells. Who is that one person?
Well, I guess it'd be the owner.
It's exactly right. It's the owner, right? The seller ultimately is the only person who is in control of creating the success that they desire, right? If there's not a meeting of the minds about what it takes to get that done, it doesn't get done.
Right, and it hasn't gotten done.
Right, and so the reality of, and we'll spend more time in the next couple of days diving into specifics on listings, right? But mainly the idea of taking a listing is, do you have a seller who is motivated? Do you have a seller who will do the things that need to get done to make sure that the property can sell, right? Things like deed restrictions, things like location, things like those are all easily handled as long as the seller recognizes one very important word. And it's a word that real estate agents run from, and I still don't understand why. That word is discount.
Mm-hmm. And that's what she doesn't want to hear.
Right? Because when you have issues, that equates to a discount. When you're on a double yellow line road, that's a discount. When you have an up driveway or a down driveway or a train that goes through the backyard, right? Those are all discount items. And what we don't oftentimes do is kind of call that out, right? I've already done math backwards to say, okay, so just let's go back in time. When you purchased this 5 years ago, here's what you paid, and here are the comps for a property just like yours. You paid like 6% less than whatever people purchased when you bought this house 5 years ago. Why do you think that is? Because you paid the discount price. You can't now be a seller 5 years later and expect not to be the discount seller. That's not the way it works, right? So recognize that these are the conversations that will help walk you through in the next couple of days. However, listings are listings are listings. I would rather you say no to somebody after you've attempted to help them see the light than just say no up front, right? My main thought is it's very difficult to have a price reduction conversation when there's a Coldwell Banker sign out in front of the yard. If it's not your sign out in front of the yard, you don't get to have those conversations. So to me, it's we're going to take the listings, and I'm going to talk with you again tomorrow and Thursday around setting your parameters, setting your criteria for what a listing actually looks like. When does it fall into your pocket, and when does it fall outside of your pocket? Right? For me, I had a tolerance of about 10% when I was still a listing agent. If they wanted to list a little higher than where the market looked like it was going to come in, I had a tolerance level of about 10%. We'd have a conversation around that tolerance, but I still said yes to the listing with some discussion points and action items over the course of the first 2 weeks. And then we would move forward from there. But again, we're getting ahead of ourselves. So let's hold off the rest of that conversation on listings for tomorrow and Thursday. Anybody else want to talk about their calls? I saw some stuff in the chat around some. So Stephanie said calls went good. Yes, there have been internet issues, by the way, all up and down the East Coast today. Something happened and there were internet issues. So hopefully we don't have any issues now. All right. So yes, Mara, go ahead.
My calls went good. I have a friend of mine that said she wants me to find her a dump on the water in Norwalk. So she said, but she's going to wait for the prices to go down. I said, I want to dump on the water in Norwalk also.
Yeah,
but,
indeed. Well, and so here's a tip in terms of working with buyers, right? Mm-hmm. Because when people say things like, I want to dump on the water in Norwalk, or right. I want a bargain in Reading, or what does that mean?
Right.
Truly, what does that mean, right? And so we have to get really good at the 2 Qs. Write this down because it doesn't exist anywhere. The 2 Qs are quantify and qualify. Quantify and qualify, right? And so if in fact someone says, I want to dump on the water in Norwalk, well, you know where they want it. But then the next question is, excellent, talk to me about what a dump looks like for you. Like what's the criteria for a dump for you? Does that mean condition? Does it mean cost? Like what are we talking about? And if it means condition, can you be more specific? Are you looking for something that needs to be bulldozed and start from scratch to build something new? Are you looking for something that you can put a coat of paint on and move into, right? My point is a lot of people have a lot of different thoughts around what the words they say actually mean. You're going to hear me say this once. You're going to hear me say it 100 times between now and the time we finish together. You have got to get really, really good at asking additional questions to make sure that you are not on a wild goose chase, right? If Mara decides that a dump means one thing, but the client actually thinks a dump means the other, and there's never a conversation around what the word dump actually references, well, now Mara's going out and finding all these properties that she thinks qualifies, bringing them back, maybe even taking the client to see them. The client's like, no. Now Mara's irritated, right? What's that phrase that we tend to rely on to help us out of a situation like that? Go ahead, Donna.
Buyers are liars.
Yeah, buyers are liars. Anybody ever hear that? Buyers are liars. And here's what's real. What's real is that buyers are not liars. Buyers just don't know well enough what they have to tell you. And so buyers aren't liars. Buyers just need help, and they need education, and they need for you to continue to ask them better and better and better questions to make sure we get really to the root of everything that is important to them. And a week or a week and a half from now, when we start our buyer unit, we're going to go through a conversation that will help you do exactly that. You guys are kind of writing the rest of the curriculum in your questions and thoughts today. So good job. All right, so your second piece of homework was calculating how many appointments per week you need to earn the amount of income that you choose to earn in the next 12 months. And so what I want you to do is just put what that number is in the chat box so we have an idea of what those numbers look like, right? How many, so it was the math that we went through last week, taking your income and converting it into appointments per week. Right, so I see 1, I see 2, I see 3, I see 7, I see 4, 4, 2, 30, right? So a couple of things that I'm noticing in the chat box. If you have a hyphen or more than one number in your answer, I want you to dive back in and make a choice. If you said 1 to 2, your answer needs to be 1 or 2, because 1 to 2 isn't a number. 2 is a number, and if it were me, if you were saying 1 to 2, I would just round up, right, to give yourself some cushion. But I want you to make a choice that you can really adhere to. Because as we finish Source of Business today into early tomorrow, you're then going to be charged with looking at how you're going to accomplish the numbers that you put in that chat box. Right? If that number, if the amount of income means something to you, well, then that number means something to you. And trust me when I tell you, you don't get 1 appointment a week or 2 or 3 or 7. You don't get that many appointments, new appointments a week by just staring at the phone, hoping it will ring. Hope is not a strategy, right? Never has been, never will be. You've got to be in action, and you've got to be in action around the right things. So as we get to the end of Source of Business today, we're going to, today into early tomorrow, we're then going to come back and have a conversation around you writing a lead generation strategy for yourself. So be paying close attention as we go through these sources of business so that you know when it's time to say, okay, so I need 45 appointments in the next 12 months, or I need 115 appointments in the next 12 months. Where are they coming from? That's the next piece of this. How many are coming from your database? How many are coming from open houses? How many are coming from expireds that you've called? How many are coming from for sale by owners? How many are coming from orphans? How many are coming from each of the different sources that we will go through? With real crystal clarity, because then I'm going to ask you to get real specific around what that looks like. If you choose that you're going to find at least 1 new appointment a week from open houses, well, then you better have a plan around open houses, right? I told you the story of the coaching call that I had where someone was upset about their number of appointments. And we talked about it and had the realization that this person expected at least an appointment a week from expireds. And I said, well, tell me, how many have you actually had from expireds? And she said 0. And I said, well, tell me about that. Why is that happening? And she said, well, because I'm not calling expireds. Well, duh, right? This is not hard. If your business plan says call expireds and that's how you're expecting to earn a living, and then you don't do that, what happens to the living you're earning? It doesn't show up, right? It doesn't show up. All right. This is not the first conversation we'll have around this. However, please remember, if in fact you hear me saying things that rub you the wrong way, it simply means that I am currently taking a stronger stand for your income than you are. Doesn't make me mean, it doesn't make you wrong. It just means I'm currently taking a stronger stand for your income than you are. And if you start to feel that way, I would challenge you to ask yourself a question. Want to know the question? Are you excited for the question? Oh, Margaret's excited. Alex is excited. See that? It's so contagious. Then Ralph was excited, and Bogdan was excited, and Katie was excited. And there are some of you who are like, you know what? I am not doing anything regardless of how many times you say someone is excited. I am not putting my thumbs up. I am not going to smile. That's okay. It's all happening on the inside for you. We get it. But here's the question I want you to ask when you start to feel that way. What would my world look like if I chose to take as firm a stand for my income as Rick currently is? What would my world look like if I chose to take as firm a stand for my income as Rick currently is? It's a great question. It's a great question. All righty. Ahas from Thursday. We started on source of business. We went through your 36 touch in your database. We went through the orphan program, and we went through for sale by owners. What were your ahas from each of those three, or any of those three sources of business? Yes, Elena.
Orphan program. I love this idea. I'm going to implement it. I never thought about it, and I don't know why. Because probably you think it's somebody else's client, blah, blah, blah. But I can bet nobody does anything with this client ever again. So I'm implementing that. And yeah, usually it was taboo. I couldn't see anybody's email or phone number or anything. That's why I asked, like, how do you guys even get the picture? Who's on the other side? Because I was with Ravis and we never saw it. It was enough with the last name, the name, something that I see in the public records. If here it's okay to ask for other clients things, then you can try to poke at them and keep in touch and see what happens. I think good things will happen.
Yeah, no, I think that the orphan program is definitely one of the most underutilized sources of business that exists in real estate. And the reason it's so underutilized is exactly what Elena put on the table, is that it for a lot of people, it feels taboo. It feels like it's somebody else's client. What is the reality around that, right? Because the orphan program starts before or after the closing? After the closing, yeah. Right? So after the closing. So after the closing, whose client is that?
No one's.
Yeah, and I would challenge you that after the closing, it's your client. Right? Because you're the one who's going to make sure that person feels loved and taken care of and communicated with and part of a larger community, and make sure that they have all the tools that they need to be successful homeowners. And what's real is that 88%, that's the number, 88% of realtors don't follow up well with past clients. That's almost 90%, 9 out of 10. So when Elena says, she knows that person's just going to get orphaned, statistically, she's almost dead on right? 9 out of 10 times, that person is going to become, at least from a real estate perspective, orphaned. So jump on in there. Jump on in there. What else does the orphan program require of you that isn't such a bad thing? I'll give you a hint. Starts with an L. It ends with istings.
Listings.
Listings. You got it. That's exactly right. Right? So listings. Is it such a bad thing to have a lead generation program in place that drives you first to take listings and then pushes you to follow up with the buyers of those listings? You see how that just becomes a snowball effect? It's awesome. Alix, what do you have for us?
Just to Elena and sort of to drill down on how to manage an orphan program, you know, we can get that info right out of MLS on our solds. They're right there.
The phone numbers and emails?
No. But just you can identify.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I know the last names. I can look at any house and see who the owner is, but where do you get the?
That's digging.
Well, and I'll tell you that it's probably less digging than most of you think, because if you will be certain inside of your transaction to make sure that you always get a data input sheet, which again is just a one-page sheet that the listing agent typically produces, that lists both sides and all the players on in the transaction, the buyers, the sellers, their agents, their agencies, their attorneys, right? Sometimes they're on the buyer side, the names of the inspectors, the name of the mortgage financing folks, right? It's just a one pager. So I would be asking for that, because I know it still exists. You may have to ask for it, but again, if you're the listing agent, you should actually be producing it. Buyer's agents, you may have to ask for it to make sure you have all that data. DJ, what do you got?
So recently I moved up more towards the Ridgefield and above marketplace after spending multiple years down lower Stamford, Norwalk, Wilton. And that form isn't something down around Stamford that we use as much as is used up here. And yet absolutely still exists. And it's demanded Ridgefield and above. I mean, you can't do a transaction without giving all that information or sending it over to your co-broke and all of their people, attorneys, all that kind of stuff. And it's magical. It has everything there.
Yeah. Yeah, so true. So again, if on the listing side, just locate it. I'm pretty certain there's an example right inside of Command and in DocuSign, right? So just locate that, know what it is, and on the list side, make sure you're filling that out and then circulate it. And on the buy side, ask for it, right? Just ask for the data. You'll be surprised how much information you get if you'll just ask for some of it, right? People are more than willing to give you that info. And then post-close, you're then armed for whatever comes your way. You're armed for an orphan program, or you're armed to make some follow-up phone calls. All right, anything else from, so great job dissecting the orphan program. I highly encourage it. What about the for sale by owner script that we gave you? Oh, Katie, go ahead.
Sorry, just unmuting. That I was going to talk about that. I never thought about the idea of just kind of checking in. It just seems so much more approachable than I think I feared what would be in my mind. And the idea that you can help, like if they're like, oh, I didn't know I had that. Well, here you go, and it just kind of keeps you current and with them so that you are the person in their mind. Or even if they end up selling it, they might say, I had a really good experience with this person. They weren't pushy. They just kind of helped me. And it just kind of reframed that for me a lot. So thanks.
Yeah, I love that. I'm so glad that you said all of those things, because it's like 1,000% yes. And what's awesome about that approach, at least I have found, is that, as Katie said, even if they do sell it on their own, guess what? They had a positive experience. Will you get referrals? if they sold it on their own and they're staying local, might you have been auditioning to help them buy someplace else, even though they're selling on their own without even realizing it? That's happened to me twice, where they didn't have an agent to go and purchase with. And I was helpful I didn't get the listing. They ended up they sold it on their own, frankly, with a little assist from me, but they sold it on their own. But then I got the business on the other side, right? And here's the other thing to think about. If you're continuing to just make weekly check-in calls and you're developing a relationship, right? Developing a relationship with that for sale by owner, depending on how long they decide to go through the for sale by owner process, you could get to a point a month later to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I was wondering, what have you been doing with the folks who have called to see your home who choose not to purchase it? And the seller says, huh? What are you talking about? Said, well, clearly they're in the market for a property. And if they're uninterested in purchasing your home, I wondered if it would be okay if you passed them to me. I would love to be able to assist in helping them find the right property for them. Now, again, that's not the first call. You have to earn that. But do you see how by call 4 or call 5, 30, 40 days later, if they're still choosing to be a for sale by owner, especially if you've helped them with forms or you've given them some advice or whatnot, I think you've earned the right to now ask them, hey, what about your buyers? I'd love to. And now they're referring buyers to you, right? So there's a whole lot of opportunity inside of the small package known as the for sale by owner. And as I think I mentioned on Thursday, there are more of them out today because of the market conditions than probably ever in my career. So there's just more opportunity with for sale by owners. It won't last forever. As soon as the market isn't quite as rocking, the for sale by owners kind of retreat. But right now, they're looking around thinking, hey, you know what? I could save myself at least a partial commission. Don't fight against that. Be for them. Be for that. It's not what they expect. And if there is one thing I have learned in business and in life, is that the way you make an impression, the way you create trust, the way you build a faster relationship, do and say things that people are absolutely not expecting you to do and say. Be the person who surprises them. Be the realtor where instead of them saying, oh, yeah, I had another realtor call me and tell me how dumb I was for listing the property, how I would never sell it myself. Some of them even give me statistics about how I will fail. Right? And guys, I'm telling you, here's how I know that agents call for sale by owners and do that. Because I used to do it myself. Until I learned a better way, that's what I used to do. Did you know, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that statistically you have, like a less than 1 in 10 chance of actually getting the property sold? Let me tell you why I'm so special. Guys, if they wanted to list the property, they would have called you. They didn't call you. They just put a sign in front of the yard, right? So support them. Make the choice that when you just go out and support their activities and their efforts, that's what sets you apart in the for sale by owner's eyes. Bogdan and then Elena.
I'll also ask them for the lead, for the for the buyers that they probably didn't like the house and they're looking for something else.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Absolutely.
And represent those buyers.
Yes. Did you nod off for a moment? Because we were just talking about that.
Yeah, probably.
and I love you, but we were just talking about that.
I'm sorry, but
but you know what? It's that good of an idea. So not once, but twice today, you heard an awesome idea around grabbing those buyers. Elena, go ahead.
By the way, internet sometimes freezes, so you can black out for 20 seconds like I did. So maybe that's what happened. But anyway, that's not what I wanted to ask. With the for sale by owners, now the Zillow is its own gig. Where will they go? Will they still list because they don't have access to MLS? Where are they going now?
So that's a great question. They may still be able to go through Zillow, right? So you may still find them on Zillow. I'm not sure exactly how Zillow is treating for sale by owners in their new experience. So it's something we can certainly look into. So they may still be there. And then I would Google for sale by owner in the town that you're looking for them in, right? For sale by owner, Fairfield County, for sale by owner, Danbury, for sale by owner, Stamford, for sale by owner, Wilton, and see what comes up. There are still sites out there like fsbo.com or forsalebyowner.com that still exist in some way, shape, or form. Again, I don't think Zillow is going to let go of those for sale by owners quickly. So at least for a while, you'll see that happening. And then some people may choose to market kind of on their own. So Googling for sale by owner in a specific town may bring up a specific house, right? And then don't forget, be on the lookout. When you're out with buyers, when you're out driving to a listing appointment, when you're out, driving your kids someplace, be on the lookout for those for sale by owner opportunities, because oftentimes they're nowhere except a sign in the yard. All righty. Yes, sir, Bogdan.
Now, I had an idea and you kind of said it half. Driving for dollars. So go around your neighborhood and look for signs in the yard.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Also look at properties that are neglected and knock on the door. That's another strategy.
Yeah, no, indeed. All good ideas. I love it. All right, guys, that's a good recap of what we covered on Thursday, and I appreciate these aha conversations because it sometimes expands the initial conversation with some additional thoughts and ideas, and B, I want to keep reminding you of the places where you need to focus to find business. Again, there's only 7 or 8 of them. It's not like we're going to hand you a book of 97 different places to find business. That doesn't exist. Sorry to say. Right? There's really only about 6 or 7 or 8 sources of business for you. And we've been through 3 of them. So where are we going to head next? And I'm pretty certain that when we put the poll up, Nicole, did you have a question?
Sorry. Oh, I switched the camera on myself, didn't I? I don't know how to switch it back.
That's okay. We're seeing you.
Okay. This came in my mailbox today. It's hard for you to see maybe, but it says the top 5 Ridgefield offices, and it put us down here at the very lowest. Yep. And then it has the nerve to say these are believed to be accurate, but not guaranteed.
Yep. From what company did that come from?
Chip and Heather Newman.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what I thought. Right. And so guys, here's the reality of statistics, right? So are Chip and Heather wrong in what they produced and sent out?
Probably.
The answer is probably not. Probably not. And here's why. Because it's a big old problem if you just make stuff up and put it on a postcard and send it out. You have to be able to source it and you have to be able to back it up. Here's what we know about statistics. You can make statistics say pretty much anything that you want it to say. So it's hard to know exactly what they ran for that. At some point, maybe that's a volume discussion, because we outsell pretty much all of our competitors in any town in Fairfield County from a units perspective. On the volume side, there are offices that outsell us on the volume side, right? And the Newman office, as opposed to the Ridgefield Market Center, does outsell us on the volume side. So maybe that was a volume discussion. Here's what I've learned over time. if they're putting my company's name on a postcard, I just say thank you and move on. Right? It doesn't matter to me what I used to get bent in half about that kind of stuff. And now I just look at it and think, you know what, somebody else decided to put our name on a card. So I'll take because what we know is that people don't really make decisions off of that stuff. Remember I told you, all that stuff is just, it's another touch. It's another touch. It's another touch. It's mind share. It's mind share. It's mind share. So if people are choosing to push out a postcard that has their name and our name on it, okay, I'll take that free touch and then send something that is more appealing to more of the buying and selling public than charts and graphs. Because the reality is, if they get 5 different postcards from 5 different companies or 5 different real estate agents, and everybody uses statistics, each of those 5 postcards is going to say that the person who sent it or that company is number 1, because they will use the statistic that matches them being at the top. So at some point, it all just, the whole I'm number 1 thing, it's not as relevant as we sometimes want it to be. Make sense? So Mara's asking, shouldn't that go against the code of ethics? Well, it depends. If they're making up numbers, then yes. You can't willingly deceive the public. However, if they're utilizing actual statistics and can source it from the MLS, just because they put a spin on statistics doesn't make the statistics themselves wrong. So the data would have to be wrong or in some way misleading in order for it to really be an ethics problem. Okay?
Mhm.
So don't let it keep you up at night, Nicole. Don't worry.
Did you like the back of the car? Do you like the dents in our car?
Why do you have dents in your car? Maybe that's a story. It's a story for
No.
off camera.
I went to the Stanford to get my photograph done today, and when I got on the freeway on 15 coming home, some man lost control of his car and rear-ended my new car.
Oh, that is not good. Well, I'm glad that you are physically okay, even if the car has some dents in it.
Yeah, so now my car has my husband just got home, so I said, go take a look because the lights are hanging off the back.
Got it. All righty. So let's dive into a source of business that we almost got to on Thursday that we'll dive into now, and that is expireds, right? Expireds. Eric, where is Eric? Is he on the call? Yes, he is. Eric, do me a favor. If you will be certain to stop me about 10 minutes before our time is up. I know you had a question about Zillow from the other morning. I saw it in the chat box just before we all kind of popped off. I'm happy to answer whatever that question is. I'm just going to push it to the end tonight. So if I can task you with reminding me, that would be awesome.
Will do. Thank you.
Sure. All right. So someone talked to me a little bit about an expired property. What does that mean if the property has expired? When we say we're calling expireds, what does that refer to?
It ran its course on MLS and did not get purchased.
The contract ended?
Exactly right, right? So the contract ended, it ran its course on MLS, didn't get sold, right? And has now come off the market because the clause in the contract about their expiration date has now come and gone, right? That's the expired property. You find them on the MLS, right? That's where they show up. When do they show up on the MLS?
Depends. Sometimes they'll show up just right as they expire that day.
Yeah,
Next.
midnight of the day.
Yeah, so expireds always expire at midnight on the day of their expiration. That's an always. Canceled can happen anytime during the course of the day or night. That's kind of the whim of the seller and the agent, right? However, the expireds all expire at midnight. And now that we have a 24-hour, well, now I'm really dating myself. who's on here that's old enough to remember the MLS when it used to shut down at like 11 or 11:30 and come back on at 5 o'clock in the morning? The DOS-based system, so it could reset, and I don't know what they had to like give the hamsters a little rest from the running in the hamster wheel. So the monks could scribe out the new listings and then bring them up the next day, right? But the simple reality is now that we have a 24-hour system, if you are a night bird or a night owl, right? A night owl, you could actually grab your expireds at night before you headed to bed, so they were ready for you in the morning, because they do expire at midnight. Midnight is a time of the day that I see only once a year. That just happened about 3.5 weeks ago. So it will be another 48 weeks or so before I see midnight again. But if that's not you, you may have an opportunity to grab that information. Go ahead, Margaret, you have a thought?
Oh, no, did I forget to unmute? No, just I agree with you 100%. That's all. Sorry.
Well, that's perfect. You can always unmute to say that. I will always. So here's what's fun about expireds. And I will tell you that expireds hold a very near and dear place in my heart. When I first moved to Ridgefield and started my real estate career, I was still pretty new to the town. I didn't really know anybody. The only person I really knew was the guy who sold me my house, and he wasn't necessarily looking for a real estate agent, right? And so when I got into real estate, the idea was, okay, go and communicate with your database. And I thought, all right, well, all the people in my database are either in New York or on Long Island. I don't know anybody in Connecticut. So where do I start? And so my path was a little different than the Met database path, in that I had to start with strangers. And so I chose open houses and expireds. I chose open houses to find buyers, and I chose expireds to find sellers. And I will tell you that I credit sitting here today in front of you 21 years later with my approach and tenacity with expireds, because I built an entire business around expireds, because again, I didn't know anybody, right? And so over time, as I started to know more people, that whole database thing kicked in, and as I met people business-wise at open houses, grew the database that way. But for me, it was as a listing agent, the only place I really knew where to go to find listings were those expireds. Now, we talked about for sale by owner on Thursday. The fun thing about expired properties is that the owners of those properties have already raised 2 hands, right? Which 2 hands have they raised? Hand number 1 is,
I want to sell my house.
I want to sell my house. So that's a really important right hand to raise. So now, instead of trying to find people who might want to sell their house, the expired prospect has already raised their hand and said, I want to sell my house. How do we know that? Well, because it was on the market. What's the other hand that they raised that makes them different from the for sale by owner?
They choose someone to work with. They chose an agent.
Exactly right. They will pay a commission. So I want to sell my house and I'll pay a commission. I don't know about the rest of you, but when people raise 2 hands like that, that to me is like someone going, hey, over here, look at me. Please, I'm literally waving at you to come and call me because I have a need that wasn't met the first time around and I need some help. So yes, those 2 hands mean one thing, but from a visual perspective, I want you to see expired sellers as literally those people that are standing on their roofs, waving you down, flagging you, saying, please come and help me. That's how I saw them. That's how I saw them. So if someone has been on the market for 6 months and has not found success, which means they have not sold their house, and they come off the market at midnight, at 8 o'clock that following morning, you make a phone call to them. What do you think some of the emotions are that you might receive on the other end of the telephone? What do you think those expired sellers are feeling?
Relief.
Angry and frustrated.
Frustration.
Aggravation.
Yeah.
Angry with her agent.
Yeah.
Yeah, so angry, frustrated, right? Rejected, aggravated. How many different synonyms can we find for like frustration and aggravation and right? They feel let down. Some of them are terrified because they needed to sell their property and didn't. Some of them feel hopeless. Some of them are looking for someone to blame. Right? So all of these things could be how they're feeling after not achieving success. I can't think of a more perfect person to make a phone call to at 8 o'clock in the morning than the person that we just described. Ooh, baby. But here's what's interesting. Go ahead, Nicole.
I have that client that lives in Brooklyn that's looking for specific areas. And so I had a meeting with Joe, and Joe said, go through the tax records, look through the tax records, see who has houses that haven't sold in 10 years. And so I've been sending them cards and I've been getting responses. But a lot of those people live in Florida, they live in New York City, and they may not know what's happening up here. So it's good to find those little Candlewood Lake or areas where people have vacation homes. And I've been mailing them handwritten cards.
Yeah, absolutely. The idea of prospecting based on, you can run a report for non-owner occupied properties right off of the MLS. You can run a report for, I was just talking to someone earlier today who is taking a lead generation path of finding people in her community who have lived in their homes for at least 20 years. Right? And doing the same kinds of thing, reaching out to them, calling them, mailing to them to see if they understand what the market's doing and that now may be a great time for them to downsize. The other thing that that sort of solves when you have the downsizer is what Niels put on the table earlier, and that is if you're going from a larger home to a smaller home, or you're selling your property and then buying a condo, right? If you're going the other way, it may feel like less of a challenge because the properties are less money. You're getting more money for your larger home, and even if you have to spend a little bit more on the downsize, you're still pocketing some money and purchasing something smaller. So psychologically, it may be an easier action for the seller to take rather than going the other way. If you're upgrading, all of a sudden you're getting X times an additional 10% for a smaller house, but then the 10% on the larger house is a bigger number, right? Where were we? I completely forgot where we were.
Expireds. And how
Yes.
frustrated people are.
Oh, yes. So here's what I want you to recognize. Well, let me ask this question first. Why don't most real estate agents reach out and call owners of expired properties?
First of all, it takes a lot of work. I had about 14 expireds that I followed up with in November, and in order to find their phone number, I had to register an account with White Pages. That's them site does not work at all, and you need to look at their home on the MLS and understand what they paid for it, and what their situation is, how long they've lived there. And most of the numbers that I did get were workable. And, you know, I left a message, and, you know, shame on me for not following up on them now from November to now. But I think I only got one person on the phone, you know, with just, they said, no, they're not interested in selling anymore. So it is a lot of work. It's not like I'm going to get these expireds and I'm going to find their phone number all of a sudden. You know, it does take a lot of work.
Well, so let's address that real quick. Understand, success in real estate is a lot of work.
It is.
Every aspect of it, right? Success in real estate, if you want to make money in real estate, there isn't a piece of this industry that's easy. Sorry. For those of you who are hoping for a different answer, I'm sorry about that, right?
You're right.
But it all is, and I won't say it's hard, it all takes work, right? It all takes work, right? And the simple reality of expireds is there are ways to streamline what Diane just said, right? So what I want you to do is I want you to hear all those steps, because those steps are pretty much dead on. I want you to hear the steps, and then I want you to just decide that we call that Tuesday in real estate, right? That's just Tuesday. And it's okay if Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday are all kind of the same, because that's part of your lead generation activities. Does that make sense? So the reality, and we're gonna dive into where you find numbers and how you make all that easy, right? Because there are easy buttons for a lot of this, and some of them cost some money. And so just recognize that in order to streamline your expired experience, having a system that gets those numbers for you. Debbie, what system do you use?
I use the Mojo dialer, and I buy the expireds, and I buy FSBOs. And it costs, so here's what I will say. If you use those systems, they have the only thing that you get a higher return for your investment on is your database. You get a huge return on investment for what it costs on a monthly basis, and yet you still have to be prepared to spend something like $300 a month for all that stuff.
Yeah. Right. And so that's one of those ways. Thank you for that. That's one of those ways that you can streamline that whole process, right? Because what I heard Diane saying was, like, it takes a whole ton of time to get the data just to be able to make the call, right? And I don't disagree with that, because if you're doing it by hand, it's kind of, you're kind of searching for some of that data. In the old days, here's what I'll tell you. In the old days, remember that DOS-based MLS system I was talking about? Well, in the old days, at least in northern Fairfield County, we would just put the name and the phone number of the seller right on the listing. So if you wanted to call the seller, you just looked at the expired listing and scrolled to the bottom and picked up the phone. Right? But now we're so fancy with showing time that we don't do any of that anymore. And it just made everything more difficult, right? Technology is not always a better path forward. I found it simpler when the names and numbers were right on the listing. However, you just kind of leverage that to move it forward. Now, go ahead, Deb.
I would add one more thing, which is you really don't need to know everything about the listing just to make the call. The whole point is to get in front of the seller. You don't have to know how long he's lived in the house, what he paid for the house. Those are questions you uncover in the conversation. So yes. That saves a whole lot.
What were the names of those other sites? Mojo Dialer?
It's called mojosells.com.
Yeah, and that's just one of those. Vulcan 7, like Live Long and Prosper, Spock from Star Trek. Vulcan 7 is another one. Land Voice is another. There's a whole bunch of them. If you go on Google and type in real estate expireds dialing system, you'll come up with a whole bunch of them.
And one of the things that they do is they scrub for do not call. That's what they advertise. So if they make a slip, it's rare, is what I will say.
So the idea of pushing forward with expireds, Debbie just made the point that we were going to immediately, and that is no one lists a property on the telephone, right? No one lists a property on the telephone. So the purpose of the call to the expired is what?
To get an appointment.
Is to set the appointment. That's the reason you're calling, is to set the appointment. And as we go through some of these scripts together, I want you to keep that in mind, because if you think that you're calling to build a rapport, you're on the phone too long and you won't close. If you think that you're there to list the property, you'll be on the phone too long, you'll ask too many questions and you won't close. If you think anything other than I'm making this phone call to obtain an appointment, you'll be on the phone too long and you won't close, right? The only reason you're picking up the telephone is to gather some motivation information and then close for an appointment to get in front of them, either face-to-face or on Zoom. That's it. And we'll demonstrate that for you shortly. For many of you, that should change the thought about what it is you're doing with an expired call, right? I'm always fascinated with people who tell me that they call expireds, but they don't know the 3 motivation questions and don't really know how to close. And so then my thought is, all right, well, so then are you trying to find friends? I'm not sure I understand the motivation behind making the call, right? I'm all full up on friends. I don't need any more of those, but I do need some additional business, right? And so when you recognize that the only reason you're making that phone call is to help them understand their own motivation to get the job done, and then push forward and ask and schedule an appointment with them, it changes everything. Trust me when I tell you, I have done this poorly and I've done it better. I've already had lengthy conversations with owners of expired properties, only to like be floating above myself, looking down on myself, thinking, what on earth are you doing? Like, why are you asking that question? Just shut up and ask for the appointment. Did you ever have that experience, like floating above, like, what am I doing? Why? Here, write this down. This is a great acronym for this moment in our conversation about expireds. The acronym is WAIT, W-A-I-T. And it stands for, why am I talking? And for those of you who just can't help yourselves, there's a second one especially relevant for you. And that acronym is WAIST, W-A-I-S-T. And that stands for, why am I still talking? Short and sweet. Short and sweet is the path to success with expireds.
Or you could kiss it.
Say it again, Donald.
I said, you could actually kiss it, K-I-S-S.
Yeah, keep it simple and short is what I'm going to say. Keep it simple and short. So Jerome asks, if we're all using the same tools, calling the same people with the same with all the same numbers, how do we differentiate? So great question. Here's my answer to that. We should only have that problem. In 21 years of real estate, I will tell you, I don't think I've ever run into that problem, except maybe one time when we had about 190 people all in one training class at one time, and we did a bold in a training program called Bold, and we all did expireds that same week. That was a little bit much that time. But other than that, the reality is many of you will not ever pick up a phone for an expired. Those of you who do The way you differentiate, we're going to dive into right now. I sent you scripts on Thursday. So you should have the scripts I sent on Thursday. What we're going to do is just run through one of them. And I want you to hear the motivation questions. Right? And this is a way to answer Jerome's question, right? How do you differentiate? Well, when you are the one who is short and sweet and asks certain motivation questions and then closes for an appointment, trust me when I tell you that sets you apart from 90% of the people who may be calling, which is only about 10 or 15% of the agent body anyway. And maybe even that number is high. Maybe it's 5% who actually call expireds, right? That means there's 40 of you, which means 2 of you on this call will call expireds if it's 5%, right? So maybe it's 10%, maybe it's just 4 of you. So here's what I want you to do. In the expired scripts that I sent you, and I sent you a whole big packet to give you an idea of lots of different ways to go about doing and saying the same thing. However, the motivation questions themselves are pretty much the same. And so who wants to just run this through with me one time? Who wants to be a seller? Again, you don't have any actual lines. You can just answer the phone and
I'll do it
a little bit. Who's that? Is that Jay?
Yep.
Great. So do me a favor. This first go around, just kind of answer the questions and be agreeable. Now, I'm not saying that to make life easier for me. I'm asking Jay to do that because I want you to hear the cadence of how this script goes.
Sure.
And if we want to spend some time like objection handling and addressing some of the things that you're scared of, we can absolutely do that as well.
Okay.
All right.
This is for expired. All right.
Yes. Ring, ring.
Hello.
Yes. Hi. Is Mr. Restrepo available, please?
This is speaking.
Mr. Restrepo, this is Rick Scott with Keller Williams Realty. I'm sure that you figured out by now that I saw you come up today on the MLS as an expired listing, and I was just calling to see if you were still looking to get your home sold.
I am.
Oh, great. Excellent. Excellent. I'm curious, Mr. Restrepo, had you sold your home, where were you headed?
On my way to Texas.
Texas. Oh, wow. Whereabouts in Texas?
In Houston.
Houston. What was bringing you to Houston?
A new job.
Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent. Hey, I'm curious. New job in Houston. When is it that starts? When did you need to be there?
Within the next couple months, for sure.
Next couple of months. Is there a specific date that you start your new job?
60 days from today.
60 days from today. Oh my goodness. Well, I am so glad that you and I are on the phone together because it sounds like you don't have a minute to waste. Hey, listen, knowing that you are interested in getting your home sold, I'm curious. I have some time later today at 4 or at 6:30. Could we get together for like a half hour and just have a quick conversation around what I do differently to get homes sold that didn't sell the first time around, sold, so we can get you off to Houston in time to start your new job?
Sure, but why couldn't you tell me over the phone?
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, that conversation takes a little more time than we currently have and also includes some really awesome visuals to really make the point. So far better that I stop by a little later. Does 4 or 5:30 work for you?
5:30 sounds great.
5:30 sounds awesome. I look forward to meeting you in person. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you later.
Thanks.
Good question, Jay. I like it. Luckily, I was prepared for it. So what did you notice about, just the cadence of that? Now, are all expired calls like that?
No.
No, of course not, right? That was done with simplicity to help us hear how that can go, right? And so the idea is you ask a simple question first. Some of you will want the hi, how are you, with a pause for them to respond, right? Others of you will move right from, this is who I am, I saw you come up as an expired. But the question you're looking for is, are you still interested in getting your home sold? Don't make the mistake of too much chit chat up front. No one's interested. You have about 8 seconds or so to capture this person's wow, what's the word? I'm looking for?
Interest, attention.
Interest.
Attention.
It was interest that I was looking for. Again, it was not a hard word I was looking for, but it did escape me. This person's interest. And so you're going to move to, are you interested in selling your home? Now here's what's fun. Jay said yes. He could have said no, or he could have said, I'm not really sure. I'm so tired of being on the market, or I just, I can't stand any of you realtors, or, your whole industry is a bunch of crooks. He could have said a whole bunch of things. I want you to recognize that hearing it and then moving forward with your script in this scenario is ultra important, because anything that Jay says that isn't, hey, why don't you come over and list my house, is a deflection on his part. Sellers, I think they all go to the same school of deflection, right? They're all trained the same way to help push you off of where you're trying to help them to get. And so regardless of what the answer is on, are you interested in selling your home? Yes, no, go to hell, doesn't matter what the answer is. You get to validate it and say, I understand. I'm curious. Had you sold your home, where were you headed? Why is that the next question?
Motivation.
Yeah,
So you
focus them
are,
on their goals.
yeah, Margaret, say that again. Motivation is 100% right. Go ahead, Margaret.
It focused them on their goals, like where they're heading.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We're looking here for a version of a pattern interrupt, right? They think the phone call is going to go one way, which is if they've heard from other agents, almost all agents go down the path of, why do you think your home didn't sell? I can do it better. Did you know I'm number one? I have a whole list of things that make me so wonderful. All of those things, that's what they expect. The pattern interrupt shows up when you make a hard right-hand turn and ask them about them. I'm curious, had you sold your home, where were you headed? And Jay told us Texas. Remember I told you about the two Qs before, right? Texas gives you an opportunity to use one of the two Qs. You get to qualify that a little bit. Oh, wow, Texas. That's a big state. Where in Texas are you headed? Houston. Now, of course, if something comes to mind about Houston, go ahead and say it. The only thing that came to my mind was humidity. And so I didn't want to throw out the fact that it was one of the most humid places in the United States and interrupt the love fest we had going on for Jay's move, right? But it could have been, Houston, I love Houston. If you've been someplace and you know something about it, don't be afraid to throw something in there. San Francisco, it's like one of my favorite places ever. I'm curious, what's bringing you there? So now you're following up the motivation question with a follow-up motivation question, which refocuses the seller on why they put the house on the market in the first place. What we're attempting to do is redirect them and point them in the direction, like Margaret said, of their goals. Their goals were not to sell the house. That's not what made them sign a listing agreement 6 months earlier. What made them sign a listing agreement was the new job in Houston, or the grandchildren about to be born down in Orlando, right? Or the retirement home in Myrtle Beach, or in Denver, or like whatever. That's what got them excited enough to say yes to their first agent. You have to refocus them on that. And what I find so interesting is that so many agents in an expired call choose to spend time focusing the seller on all the negative, on the reasons, like the question, tell me, why do you think your home did not sell? I don't think I would, if there was no other question on the planet, I don't think I would ask that question. Because it just focuses them on the negative result that they achieved.
And if they bring it up,
go ahead, Jay.
If they bring it up, or maybe they're not as motivated, or what if they're looking to sell in like 6 months? I'm just wondering, how would you handle that?
Yeah, so great question. Any of those questions that would come up, here's my my close for that. You know what, Jay, that is a great question, and we will absolutely discuss that when we meet. Guys, here's you have to resist the urge to answer the question live. We're so pre-programmed to want to give the information, answer the question, carry on the conversation. I'm here to tell you that you're better as an expired caller if you will ask 3 or 4 questions and then immediately ask for an appointment. And I will tell you that those of you who believe that that system doesn't work, that they need to know you better, you need to build rapport, you have to do all this other stuff, I'm here to tell you that's just simply false. Because they don't want to spend as much time on the phone with you either. You called them at 8:03 in the morning. They're busy. They're trying to get the kids out the door for school, or they're trying to get ready for work. They're not interested in having a 20-minute conversation with you. And I want to be really clear here. If you're having big, long 20, 25-minute conversations with expireds, my guess is you have a big database full of people who might someday use you, and you don't have a ton of appointments. Because moving people to an appointment is a different skill than making friends. Michaela.
Hello, thank you. I know I've had my camera off for most of the night, but I'm here and I'm actively listening and I've been soaking it in. Quick question, ignorant question. I feel like I'm definitely missing something, like something's not clicking for me with expired. So you have the person who maybe they knew that their contract was about to expire and they were counting down the seconds and they haven't had a great relationship with their realtor and they knew that that was coming. And they may or may not have the next realtor lined up, or they may have been waiting to go and work with someone else the second, that morning. Or you've got the other person who has no idea that the contract is up and, this is news to them, and they might have a great relationship with their realtor and say, oh, I didn't know, let me go call my realtor and we'll take care of that on the paperwork end. So where is this gray area in between where people are, can you be my knight in shining armor? I guess I'm just not understanding where this gray area is.
So Debbie, I'm going to pull you in on this. Is Andy still on the call? Is Andy? I don't think so. I think we lost Andy. So Debbie, if you could just unmute, let me ask you a question or two about that. So how many times in your expired calling do you find someone who has absolutely no idea that their contract just expired? Is it a lot? Is it a little? Is it kind of someplace in between?
It's now and then. You do. You find it out now and then. Yes. 10% of the time, something like that.
Got it.
Yes.
So most of the time when you're making an outbound phone call to an expired, 90% of the time or so, yes, they know that the property expired, and maybe they're expecting calls, maybe they're not, but they know that the property is expired.
So it depends on what expireds you're calling. If you're calling brand new baby fresh expireds, you may have 20%. You may have 1 out of 5 who don't know that they're expired because they just came off the market 8 hours ago.
Right.
But
And so,
not more than that.
and so hopefully that answers question number one, Michaela, is that that's kind of how things are skewed, right? 80-20 or 90-10. Most of the time, most of the people that you'll be reaching on the telephone already know that they are expired. The good news is if they don't, you just simply use it. Again, one of my favorite scripts, and remains one of my favorite scripts to this day, is, wow, I am so glad I called. Right? So when they say, I had no idea. I thought my property was still on the market. Oh my goodness me. Thank goodness I called today. Right? So I'm curious, had you sold your home, where were you headed? The script isn't different. So if they say, oh my goodness, no, I'm certain I'm still on. No, I'm going to tell you, I'm looking right at the MLS here, and you did come off the market. I'm so glad I called to make sure that you knew that. Hey, I'm curious, Michaela, had you sold your home, where were you headed? And Michaela tells me Orlando. Oh, Orlando, Disney World. I love Orlando. We're there, twice a year with the kids. Hey, I'm curious, what's bringing you to Orlando? Oh, I have a job transfer. Got it. Hey, I'm curious, with that new job transfer bringing you to Orlando, when did you need to be there? And Michaela says, well, I'd hoped to be there by now. Oh man, that is tough. Well, I am so glad I called today, because one of the things I have an expertise in is getting homes sold that didn't sell the first time around. I have some time later today at 4 or 5:30, which works best for you, for us to sit and just spend a half hour and see how we can get you to Orlando.
So if they didn't know that it was expired and you're the one informing them of that, they are really willing to leave the realtor that they've been working with. I mean, I get it. Obviously, this is an ignorance thing, and I'm not well versed in speaking with expireds, but I'm just trying to understand kind of where I guess it's a case by case scenario with what their motivations are, right? You would never. Yeah.
Yes, and that is 100% correct. It is case by case, right? So what we can't do is make generalizations about how the expired will behave. Although I will tell you, if you do it enough, they do kind of fall into just a few categories, right? Right. Most people are not belligerent, right? Those of you who call expireds, would you agree with that?
100%. And the one thing I want to re-emphasize is the script that Rick just used, which sounds like it's like, what's that? What kind of an expired script is that? Where are you going to move? That's a point of differentiation. And that script will get you an appointment because you don't sound like everybody else. If you can get to that line, people start to talk and you have a conversation. That's all. And then they'll say, well, maybe I will meet with you.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. What Debbie's saying is 110% reality, right? And the other piece of what Michaela was saying is, are there some expired sellers who get the phone call, say, oh my goodness, I had no idea I was expired. I better call my agent. Sure. And I will tell you this, if it were me, I would use the exact same script. Oh no, it can't be. Oh, I am so sorry to be the bearer of this news. However, I can tell you it is officially off the market as of midnight last night. Hey, I'm curious, before you call your agent, had you sold your home? Where were you headed? What was bringing you there? When did you need to be there? I am going to get those 3 questions in if it kills me, because I am not deterred by any of the deflection techniques that they're going to bring forward, or, and this is an important one for a lot of you, so pay close attention to what I'm about to say. I am not deterred by something sounding slightly unnatural. And many of you struggle with, well, I can't possibly make such a weird pivot from them telling me they want to go call their agent to me asking what was driving their sale. And if you will let go of that doesn't feel or sound natural, and ask the question anyway, because it is the natural next part of the script that sets you apart, makes it about them, and gives you the data that you need to help you close for the appointment. I promise you success if you will do those things. The struggle is that many of you struggle with that script, or many of you will want it to feel more natural. Well, if they've said they're going to call their agent, it's rude not to have them go and call their own agent. See, I look at it completely differently. When you build a business based on contribution, I look at it from the perspective of when I call and they don't know that their house has fallen off the market, I view that as a disservice to them. They raised their hand and said, I want to be sold. And now 6 months later, they're not sold. And their agent didn't even call to give them the heads up that the property was going to come off the market. To me, I'm like riding in on my white horse to rescue them from incompetence. Now, that's not a script, and please don't use it as such. But I'm just saying that to you. That's how I build myself up to be able to come and deliver scripts at a level that don't have to necessarily feel natural, that don't have to follow a certain pattern, except to get them to talking about themselves, their goals, and their needs. Because when you can pivot them right in the beginning to talking about themselves, their goals, and their needs, I will tell you, I have experienced, Michaela, the call that you described that ended up with, hey, I think I have to call my agent, pivoted them to those 3 motivation questions, got the motivation, asked for the appointment, having them say, well, it feels kind of rude not to just even call my agent. You know what? Understood. Let's do this. Why don't we hold, since your agent didn't call you to give you the heads up that the house was coming off the market, let's do this. Instead of at 4 o'clock, I actually have some time at 10:30 this morning. Can you and I have a Zoom call at 10:30? Let's get through that Zoom call, because again, I have an expertise in getting homes sold that didn't sell the first time around. And if you're not interested, if you're not completely convinced that I can create a different result for you, I'll call your agent for you. Right? And so it's allowing you to utilize that circumstance. You're not saying anything bad about the agent per se, but you're just using the facts to say, you know what, I think you owe it to yourself. Because the other script that you could use is, I completely understand. The reality in this situation, Michaela, is that, you don't really owe your previous agent anything. And frankly, you don't owe me anything either. However, you do owe yourself the very best shot at getting to Orlando quickly. Do you agree with that?
So, and I'm going to say, use that script. That is, write that down, because that applies in a whole lot of circumstances, and it's a great one.
Go ahead, Michaela. What other question did you have?
You hit it exactly what I was looking for. It was just as you cannot believe that someone would be rude enough to hang up on you when you call back and go, I know that didn't just happen. That's what I was looking for. Was I cannot believe a realtor who has a client would let it expire. It has to be a mutually decided upon thing that, okay, this wasn't working out, we're going to let it expire and you'll move on. So when you said incompetence, that was what I was looking for. That's what I was thinking. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And so hold on, I'm going to stop the recording a second.
And you have an opportunity to shine and stand out in a very crowded field. It's not as crowded in the really truly professional level of service that you're able to give them.
Yeah, absolutely. Donna?
And here's another spin on it. The reason why we should be all in these classes and everything that is offered to us is because often we'll find ourselves in the position of having to carry the co-broke along with us because they don't have access to all this information and training that we have. And to save the deal and to do the best for your client and theirs, often you've got to carry the day. You've got to know your craft because sometimes you're in there all by yourself.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, that is 110% true. And being in there all by yourself when you know there are other people around is harder than being truly by yourself, right? Because when there's other people around and you're by yourself, it's like you feel like there should be some assist on the other side, even a smidge, and oftentimes you don't get that, right? So when you're, yeah, I mean, these guys are saying really good things, right? So
a house I sold 4 years ago, I remember it was one of the first houses I sold, and it was a deal where it expired, and then, you know, we went and saw it, then it expired, then they made an offer, and so there were some questions whether they were going to rehire the same realtor, and it was complicated. So I went to Rick, and you know, and anytime I had a question, I asked them, and then I got back to the realtor. And, you know, at the end, the other realtor who had been like you know, some fancy person leading either a realtor board member or something like that, told me that how fantastic a job I'd done. She, you know, that I couldn't have, you know, been more professional, which I took as a compliment for myself and that I paid attention during class, but also the fact that I was able to ask people who knew to, you know, the way to handle it. So, you know, and also that, you know, Rick jumped right in and made sure that we got something in writing from the other side and so on. But it could have blown up and it didn't. So just, if you have questions, go to the experts, go to these people, because they are there for you. They're not there just to whatever, they'll jump, whatever hands on you need to get a deal done, they're there for you.
we're not just here to look pretty, although we certainly do that as well. That's just a bonus you get. Nicole, and then we're going to move forward.
I was just going to say, when I sold my first home that I ever bought in Los Angeles, I got a realtor who was referred to me, and he was the worst. And our house was selling for $500,000, and he made me do my own open house. He put no signs out, and he said that he normally doesn't deal with houses under $1 million, but he was doing it as a favor for the person who had referred him to me.
Yeah. So Debbie, make that face again, because that's the perfect answer to that.
It's and I say, then don't do it. So there's a mindset as well. It doesn't matter if it's $100,000 condo or a $5 million house. You either commit to it or you don't, because that's just gross. That's what we're talking about when we say incompetence. That's an incompetent agent. I don't care if he sells $10 million houses.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so we are going to cruise forward and finish up some expireds. I did see Ralph in the chat box. Are there scripts for expired listings? Yes, I emailed those out to both market centers on Thursday. So there's probably 10 solid pages of expired scripts. There's also expired scripts in Power Session number 3 in your Ignite materials. So between those two places, there's more expired scripts than you'll know what to do with. And what's cool is, I want you to understand why I give you so much, because some of you will like the way one of them sounds and maybe not the other, right? So read through all of them. You won't fall in love with every single one of them. Like the one I read was from Doris Carlin. However, Doris Carlin's from Joplin, Missouri, right? And she's great at expireds, except she's from Joplin, Missouri, and I'm not. And so therefore, some of the things that she says are a little Joplin-y for me, right? So when you're from New York, I want to speed it up and shorten it a bit, right? So recognize that a lot of the scripts that I'll put in front of you are taken from so many of these masters and kind of pushed together to make sure that the intro is what I like, right? The intro in Doris Carlin's script is, when are you going to start interviewing some of the top agents for the job of getting your home sold? See, that to me is just one extra step in getting the answer to, do you still want to sell your house? I do want to hear that answer to that question. So for me, it's let's just jump right to, I'm curious, because again, when someone calls me and I actually answer the phone, like if it's not one of you and I choose to pick up, which hardly ever happens, which is why you're all on my phone, right? So if it's somebody else and I choose to answer it, they have like 5 seconds to capture my attention, and I'll make a decision whether or not I want to actually continue this conversation. After 5 or 6 seconds, I thank you very much. I don't have time for you. Goodbye. That's the people you're calling. Go ahead, Jerome.
Hey, to that point, is there any cues or scripting on voicemails on any of that? Because your scripts are concise, but they're engaging. If you're engaging with dead phone, what do you have for guidance there?
Yeah, so great question. And this goes back to something Diane said earlier, right, about leaving the messages. There are 2 schools of thought on this. I'll give you both. I'll give you the one that I subscribe to first. Personally, I would play like the 3 rings game and move on, right? With expireds, you're engaging when you can engage, right? Jerome just put that on the table for us. You're only engaging when you can engage. If you're engaging with an answering machine or a voicemail, you're not engaging with any human. You're engaging with a machine. So I don't personally think that leaving messages is as productive as most people want it to be. I'll tell you what message I would leave if I were leaving a message in just a moment. Instead, what I would do is develop an expired system that goes something like this. If you're calling new expireds, like the newbies every morning, you're going to call them at 8 o'clock, and you're going to call them at 11:30, and you're going to call them at 4:30, and maybe you're going to call them at 7:30, right? You're going to reach out 3 or 4 different times during the course of the day until you get them on the phone. And if you don't get them on the phone, you'll try them again the next day. And if you don't get them on the phone the next day, you'll put them in a follow-up system that says, I'll try them again 48 or 72 hours from then, and then once again next week, and then once again the following week. Now you're paying attention to see if their property comes back on the market, right? Because if it comes back on the market, they need to be removed from your call list, because now you could be interfering with a new agency relationship. So you have to be monitoring and tracking all of that and be cautious around it. However, the idea that you make an outbound phone call to the owner of an expired property once on a Tuesday morning, and if you don't get them, well, then you move on to the next one, never to call that one again, to me is like insanity. That's not an expired program. That's making some calls. The system itself is in the follow-up, right? Do you ever hear that? The money's in the follow-up? Well, this is one of those opportunities where the money's in the follow-up. And so it's a matter of getting someone on the telephone and doing what you have to do over the course of the day, or 48 hours or 72 hours to actually get somebody on the telephone.
So unless you think that means call once or twice or even 5 times, I think my record was the 27th time I called this guy, I got a listing. So when Rick says system, this is not something you do and then you say, well, I tried that. This is system. It's week after week, month after month.
Yeah, until you finally get them on. And my guess, Debbie, is it was time 27 the first time you actually got them on the telephone, or
Yes.
had you spoke? So it was. So it took 27 times to get them on the phone, but then you got the appointment and took the listing.
And I did used to leave more elaborate messages. The only message I leave now, if I leave a message, because most I don't. I subscribe to what Rick said. Messages are a waste of time most of the time. Is I have a question about your home. Call me.
That's the script. That's the script. Did you hear it? Hey, this is Rick Scott. I have a quick question about your home. Here's the number. Period. Right? Here's one thing I want you to avoid. Warning, this may sound a little harsh. Be careful when you're calling expireds and leaving. You know, Debbie said in the old days she would leave longer, more elaborate messages. Be careful about doing something that makes you feel like you're doing more as a real estate agent, because it takes up some more time, and there's the smallest possibility that someone may actually return the phone call. Because when you do that, you absolve yourself of any responsibility for the result, right? Because you get to say, well, I left all these messages for all these people and no one called me back. So be really careful about that, right? Now, I'm not saying that any one person on this call does or did that. What I'm saying is my experience in coaching real estate agents is that that comes up a lot. And so I want to push it out to you so that you can kind of take a look in the mirror and say, am I doing that? Or when it starts to feel like you're doing things to take up more time that aren't giving you results, you have to look at that level of efficiency. What could I do differently to create a different result? Or else you're ending up being busy instead of being productive, right? And those are two very different things. Does that make sense to everybody? Eric, what do you got for us?
Yeah, don't want to be difficult, but let's play this. You know, I'm a very frustrated seller. My agent in this market for 6 months couldn't sell my house, so I'm fed up with him. And I thought, like, well, let the contract expire. And then, you know, somebody calls me, and then I go, well, what the hell is going on here? You're the 5th person from Keller Williams calling me. Don't you people talk to each other? How do you handle such a situation? Because I can imagine there's a very frustrated audience out there on expired.
Yeah. So if you said that to me, you're the 5th person from Keller Williams who's called me, don't you people talk to one another? What I would say is the 5th, oh my goodness, there are 550 of us in Fairfield County. What are the other 445 doing? I'm going to have to get on that.
Okay,
you know,
I just gave you a number.
But in all seriousness, Eric, the question I have for you this morning ultimately is, are you still interested in getting your home sold? And Eric will give me an answer or he won't. And then I'll move on to, hey, I'm curious, before I let you go, I'm curious, had you sold your home, where were you headed? What was taking you there? When did you need to be there? Because now all of a sudden, the frustration with thank you, the frustration with you know, so many people are calling me is redirected to what was the result you were looking for. And let's refocus on what's important to you, because frankly, you getting 5 or 6 different phone calls, whether they're all from Keller Williams or they're from other agencies or from whatever, it's kind of, from a seller's perspective, that's not the relevant conversation, right? Remember, I said before, sellers are really good at deflecting us away from getting to the meat and potatoes. They don't want to deal with it either, because it feels like, at some level, it feels like a bit of a failure for them as well. And yet helping them move forward with those motivation questions to get them to the spot of understanding that their goal was real and that they put their house in the market for a reason, right? All of those things. So some of the objections we get sometimes, well, you know what, so, you know, 4 o'clock or 5:30, you know, I'm not ready to see anybody else because we just expired yesterday. And, you know, the reality was that agent told me for 6 months my price was too high and I just don't believe it. And, you know, I think that they should have done so much more. Guys, there are 2 words in all of your script work that with expireds who are emotional, whether it's anger or fear or disappointment, if there's emotion there, you need to utilize the 2 words that rescue you from almost every scenario, and that is, I understand. There's another 2 words that I will also push out for you, and that is, I'm sorry. Now, you didn't do it, but if Eric was upset about all the phone calls he was receiving, I might simply say, you know, Eric, I am so sorry that you have all those folks reaching out to you. The good news is you've received your last call now that you and I are talking. I'm curious, had you sold your home? Where were you headed? What was taking you there? When did you need to be there? Wow, you know, it sounds like you really have a need to get this job done. The good news is that I have an expertise in getting homes sold that didn't sell the first time around. I'm curious, do you have some time today at 4 o'clock or 5:30 for us to spend just 30 minutes on Zoom to strategize getting you down to wherever or whatever, right? Do you see how the idea is we're always going to pivot back to let's help them understand why we're actually calling. And remember I said to you last week, don't allow human moments to go unrecognized, because that's just weird. If Eric's upset, like from an anger perspective, I might even say, my goodness, Eric, you sound really angry, and I am so sorry that this experience has left you feeling angry. I'm curious, had you sold your home? Where were you headed? Right? And we just simply move through the script. And guys, I want to be clear. I'm not saying this for comedic effect. I'm saying this because this is how you work with expired sellers. You address what's real for them so that they don't feel ignored and they don't feel unheard. And then you pivot them to those motivation questions and close for an appointment. Donna Gilbert, what do you got for us?
I just wanted to highlight that little bit of magic, that little golden nugget that you just dropped on us, that pivot when you said, well, now you've received your last call now that you and I are talking to each other. It's a perfect example of what you talk about all the time, which is showing up and being the one. You've just showed him that. Here I am to rescue you.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome. What was it worth your 2 hours tonight for that little nugget?
Yes, thank you.
Right. And so guys, here's what it takes. What it takes is practice. It just takes practice. I think I said this to you before. If I didn't say it, I'll say it now. I am 1,000,000 times better at scripts today than I was when I was actually in the field. I'm 1,000,000 times better at these expired scripts than I was when I was calling expireds every day. Why is that?
Practice.
Yes, it's not only is it practice, it's, and so some of you may hear that as years of practice. Well, sure. Do I have years of practice? Yes. But why I'm better today than I ever was when I was actually doing the do is because I now am called upon to demonstrate it and model it to help you move forward and make your own money in the same arena, right? I have to practice. Let me restate that. I choose to practice to make sure that when I'm in front of you, I can give you good stuff. I choose to practice to make sure that when we role play or you have a question that I don't say, you know what, good question. I don't know how I'd handle that. Minimally, I have a thought from my own practice sessions, right? So if I'm sitting here as the instructor telling you that I practice this stuff to this day to get better and better and make sure that I am fluent in the language of real estate, I hope what you'll take away from this is that if you're not yet fluent, you need to practice over and over and over and over again to get fluent, right? Where's my friend Eric? Eric speaks 4 different languages that I know of. And I think I can name them. I think Eric speaks Dutch, German, English, and French, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? Did I get him? Okay. So
and real estate.
Eric speaks 4 languages. Eric, would you tell us, would you agree that in order to speak 4 languages fluently, you've got to do it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. It's practice.
Yeah, I agree. It's because I was the first Dutch-speaking person who was employed in a French-speaking company, where the first 2 weeks I had instructions or I had training from IBM at that time with the course material in English, the guy in front of me speaking French. So I went home every night with a head like a pumpkin. But it's the practice every day. Now I can sit in a meeting with you guys and I will change from French to Dutch to English to German in a heartbeat without even thinking. It's practice. So totally agree. Practice, practice, practice.
Got it. Thank you for that. All right, guys, we're going to, I'm going to answer a question about Zillow, because so we're going to end our source of business conversation. We will pick up tomorrow with open houses and agent-to-agent referrals, and any questions about additional objections or concerns that you might have, anything you might be afraid of from an expired perspective, but then dive deep into open houses and agent-to-agent referrals. And then likely by the middle to end of tomorrow, we'll start shifting out of source of business to our seller unit, which will start with some tools that you'll use for sellers, and then you'll get the scripts for the seller consultation, which we will go through. So I'm excited to get that. I'm hoping that our expired conversation encourages some of you to leap out into the world of expireds. Trust me when I tell you, it takes practice, and it's simpler than you think. It's simpler than you want to make it, right? Success with expireds is what we talked about. It is what I mean, you can choose to be off this call tonight and say, I'm going to do it differently. That is completely up to you, right? We live in a free country, so you can do it however you choose. What I modeled for you and what some of your colleagues modeled for you was short and sweet wins the day when it comes to expireds, because you're simply looking for an appointment. So keep it short and keep it sweet. Don't complicate it. So, so there was a question from my conversation around Zillow the other day. Eric, what exactly was the question? And I'll just spend a minute or two on that and then we'll be done.
The question was very simple. I didn't know, as I'm new in the business and in this country, I just wanted to understand a little bit more the context about how Zillow operated in the past. But I understood it's a vendor. It was a vendor, and that now they have their own brokerage. And yeah, maybe reiterate a little bit on what would be the impact, the potential impact on us. I don't see a lot of danger, but you're the expert.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, I don't see, for most people, I don't see a big impact really at all. I think people who built their business around Zillow's tools, which means, are you buying Zillow leads, and are you pushing all of your reviews from clients to Zillow? People who really made Zillow a focus of their business, I think today should start figuring out a different path forward, because I think that Zillow long term is going to continue to cut off services like that for real estate agents now that they are in the brokerage business themselves. Again, this is not new news. It's been happening for 10 years, and so it's just finally happened. So I don't think there's a big shift. The reality is that the consumers, the buying and selling public, do utilize Zillow more than they use any other website to find and search for property. And so our challenge continues to be redirecting them to something different. And what we can do is start with making sure that every single person in your database, right, if the 180,000 people inside of our company each have only 5 people in their database, right, that's already 1 million people who are now utilizing the KW app, which cuts Zillow out. The KW app, the search tool on the KW app, was designed based on Zillow. If you look at the two, they're identical because we copied Zillow's platform because we wanted their eyeballs not to be jarred away from your app, right? But what it takes is making sure that you're not relying on outside vendors to grow your business and grow your industry. It's something Gary's been railing about for as long as we've been in business with him, right? And this is why, because eventually you give them all the tools and all the power, you cede control of your own clients to do searches on their sites, only for them to go and get a real estate license and cut you out of the picture. Now, again, I don't believe that's going to happen. I think that Zillow likely has a long-term plan of attempting that, but I think that we're ahead of them enough right now that as long as we do the right things, that won't occur. So do I think it's a big problem? I don't. Do I think that it's an opportunity? I do. What's the opportunity? Redirect. Utilize the tools that you have. If you don't know how, learn how to utilize our own tools and pull your people off of some of these aggregator sites and onto the tools that we've built for you, because it will uncomplicate things if and when Zillow starts to cut real estate agents out of the picture off of their own tools. Hopefully that was a good synopsis for you. Guys, it's always a pleasure to spend time with you. So have a great evening. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock for the finish of Source of Business. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Bogdan, I'll call you on my drive home.
Okay, thank you.
I'll go.